Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Nehami and these are the headlines. In Afghanistan, U.S. troops have handed over a military camp to Afghan forces in southern Helmand province as drawdown continues. This coincides with the visit of U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad to Kabul, where he discussed the peace process with the Afghan leadership. However, violence remains rampant in the country, with local officials blaming the Taliban for killing 20 government soldiers in an attack on an army outpost in Farah. The Taliban have not claimed the responsibility for the attack, but said they have killed a number of Afghan soldiers in attacks elsewhere. International organizations have urged EU leaders to press New Delhi to end discriminatory policies against minorities in India and restrictions in Kashmir. The call by 8 human rights organizations comes ahead of a summit between EU and Indian leaders on the 8th of May. They also urge the EU to hold India accountable for its abusive policies and call for immediate release of all human rights defenders. The EU has summoned Russia's ambassador to condemn Moscow's last week decision to bar 8 officials from entering the country. Moscow has said the decision was made in retaliation for sanctions imposed over the imprisonment of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. In India, the number of coronavirus cases is fast approaching 20 million as the country reported over 300,000 infections for the 12th straight day. In Pakistan, the government says it will vaccinate 70 million people by the end of this year. The country has recorded 79 deaths and over 4,200 cases overnight. Meanwhile, UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the country will be able to end social distancing rule in June as Europe eases lockdown. Globally, the virus has claimed over 3.2 million lives and infected over 152 million people. Those are the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. In Afghanistan, U.S. troops have handed over a military camp to Afghan forces in southern Helmand province as drawdown continues. This coincides with the visit of the U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad to Kabul, where he discussed the peace process with the Afghan leadership. However, violence remains rampant in the country, with local officials blaming the Taliban for killing 20 government soldiers in an attack on an army outpost in Farah. According to the Defense Ministry, 62 Taliban were killed and 58 others wounded in the last 24 hours. The Taliban have not claimed the responsibility for the attack, but said they have killed a number of Afghan soldiers in attacks elsewhere. International groups have urged the EU to raise the deteriorating human rights situation in India during a summit with the Indian leadership later this week. In a statement, 8 rights bodies said the bloc must press New Delhi to reverse its discriminatory policies. The organization said the Indian government has imposed harsh restrictions on Muslim-majority areas in occupied Kashmir. The groups called on the bloc to show its commitment to upholding human rights and hold the Indian government accountable. The EU has summoned Russia's ambassador to the bloc to condemn Moscow's decision to bar 8 officials from entering the country. The Kremlin said the travel ban came in retaliation for sanctions imposed on Russian citizens by the EU. The EU says it will consider its next steps at a meeting of foreign ministers in the coming week. Moscow has called on the EU not to interfere in its internal affairs and denies any wrongdoing. Tensions between Moscow and the West remain high over a range of issues, including the jailing of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. Turkey says it attaches importance to preservation of Libya's integrity, sovereignty and political unity. Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said this during a joint press conference with his Libyan counterpart in Tripoli. He also called for the expulsion of the foreign forces from the country. Earlier, a Turkish delegation of ministers and intelligence had paid an unannounced visit to Libya's capital. The visit is the first from Turkey since Libya's new unity government was formed in March. Last month, a Libyan delegation visited Turkey, with the two countries reaffirming their commitment to bolster ties. Turkey says its armed forces has killed 7 PKK militants during an anti-terror operation in northern Iraq. At a press briefing, Defense Minister Hulusi Akar said the Turkish commandos raided a cave and killed the militants. He said the cave needed special techniques to enter, which Turkish special forces accomplished without any loss. Hulusi Akar visited the operation zones in Iraq along with high-level military officials to monitor the developments. He said the number of neutralized terrorists in Iraq has reached 53, while 7 Turkish soldiers have also died. The defense minister added the forces also seized a huge supply of arms and advanced ammunition. The Saudi-led Arab coalition says it has intercepted a ballistic missile and 2 armed drones launched by Yemen's Houthi rebels. In a statement, the coalition said the projectiles were aimed at the southern city of Najran. But the Houthis claimed they targeted the Najran airport and King Khalid Air Base with 2 ballistic missiles and 4 drones. Meanwhile, the battle between coalition-backed Yemeni forces and Houthi rebels rages on for Yemen's oil-rich Marib province. A coalition spokesperson said Yemeni troops have seized several mountainous locations near Marib after the fierce clashes. In Syria, a court has approved President Bashar al-Assad's application to run in the May 26 presidential election. The court also cleared 2 other candidates, but Assad's run is almost guaranteed to give him a 4th term. Assad has ruled since 2000, succeeding his father, who seized power in a 1970 coup. To participate in the elections, the candidates must have lived in Syria for the last 10 years, which rules out exiled opposition figures from standing. The US and the Syrian opposition have denounced the election as a farce designed to cement Assad's rule. Earlier, top UN officials said the election did not fulfill Security Council resolutions. Israeli forces have shot dead a Palestinian woman, accusing her of attempting a stabbing attack. Palestinian state media says the 60-year-old woman died of wounds at a junction near Bethlehem city. They said occupying troops also wounded 5 Palestinians in Nablus city in the northern West Bank. Eyewitnesses say soldiers raided Beth town and wounded 3 Palestinians with live bullets and another 2 with plastic bullets. Meanwhile, Hamas has warned Israel against evicting Palestinians in East Jerusalem. Prime Minister Mohammed Shatayyeh has called on the EU to pressure Israel to allow elections to be held in East Jerusalem. Myanmar's one of the most powerful rebel groups say it has shot down a government helicopter. The information wing of the Kachin Independence Army reported heavy casualties on both sides. Meanwhile, anti-coup protesters have again gathered in different cities and vowed to defy any order from the junta. A large number of people also gathered in the town of Loika, marking the global Myanmar Spring Revolution. The US, the European Union and 15 other countries have demanded the release of media workers in Myanmar. According to an advocacy group, at least 765 people have been killed in the crackdown on dissent so far. Japan and US have reaffirmed their commitment to denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Japanese Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi met with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken in London ahead of the G7 summit in June. The two further reiterated the importance of peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, and they also vowed to maintain contact with the Association of the Southeast Asian Nations on the crisis in Myanmar. This is the second meeting between Motegi and Blinken since the administration of President Joe Biden came to power. New Zealand says differences with China are becoming extremely harder to reconcile as Beijing's role changes. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was speaking at the China Business Summit in Auckland. Ardern said there were areas in which China and New Zealand cannot and will not agree, but these differences need not define their bilateral relationship. She called on Beijing to act more responsibly as a growing power. Ardern's comments follow pressure from the West over Wellington's reluctance to use the Five Eyes alliance against China. Chad's ruling military council has named a transitional government after the death of President Idris Deby, but leading opposition figures have rejected the interim government, calling it the continuation of an old order. A military spokesperson said Deby's son Mehmet has named 40 ministers and deputy ministers. In a statement, he said the new National Reconciliation Ministry will be led by Atiq Ibn Umar, a former rebel chief. The opposition says the new setup will not go far as long as Chad doesn't have a civilian president and a military vice president. Thousands took to the streets last week in protest against the military rule, and at least 6 died in clashes with police. More stories to follow, but right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back. India has reported more than 300,000 coronavirus cases for the 12th straight day, with the caseload approaching 20 million. Globally, the virus has claimed 3 million lives and infected more than 152 million people so far. More in this report.
The end of the pandemic seems horrifyingly far as the world continues to report almost 1 million cases every day. The latest Gallup survey shows 1 in every 2 people worldwide saw their earnings drop due to the fallout. Activists are warning of India like oxygen shortages in Bangladesh, Ethiopia, and other countries. They have called for significant international efforts to ensure all countries have sufficient oxygen supplies. Over in India, crematoriums burn through the night to keep up demand as the health system buckles under pressure. The country registered nearly 370,000 infections and more than 3,400 deaths in the past 24 hours. The highly infectious COVID-19 variant first found in India was most recently detected in Malaysia. The US has pledged to negotiate with the World Trade Organization on ways to overcome intellectual property issues for a wider distribution of vaccines. Elsewhere, in a unique and rather shocking study, the English city of Liverpool hosted a one-off music festival to test whether significant events spread COVID-19. Nearly 5,000 people took off their masks and ditched social distancing rules in the name of science and music.
Pakistan has reported 79 COVID-19 deaths and over 4,200 infections in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the nationwide death toll has risen to 18,149. Pakistan has recorded more than 834,000 cases since the pandemic began. More than 728,000 people have recovered so far. The number of active cases is approaching 88,000, while Special Assistant to Prime Minister on Health, Dr. Faisal Sultan, said 70 million people will be vaccinated by the end of this year. Pakistan and Saudi Arabia have reaffirmed the resolve to further strengthen their bilateral ties with renewed focus on economic cooperation. In a tweet, Pakistan's embassy in Riyadh said envoy to the kingdom, Lieutenant General Bilal Akbar, held a meeting with Saudi ambassador to Pakistan. It said both ambassadors discussed matters related to the upcoming visit of Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan to Riyadh. The visit is aimed at strengthening bilateral ties as a number of deals are expected to be signed between the two countries. In Bangladesh, at least 26 people have died after a speedboat collided with a sand-laden bulk carrier and sank in Padma River near Madaripur district. Police officials say 5 people have been rescued while several others are still missing. They said the speedboat was en route to Bangla Bazar from Shimulia ferry ghat carrying over 30 passengers. Police said the rescue operation is still underway. Hundreds of people die each year in ferry accidents in the country due to extensive inland waterways and lax safety standards. At least 11 people have drowned after a boat carrying 24 Europe-bound migrants capsized off Libya. The UN's migration agency says the Libyan Coast Guard rescued 12 migrants near western Zawiya town. It also called for an urgent change in approach to the situation around Libya and the central Mediterranean. The International Organization for Migration says around 7,000 migrants were returned to Libya so far this year. The Democratic Republic of Congo has declared the end of an Ebola outbreak that killed 6 people in the eastern North Kivu province. International aid group Doctors Without Borders said the outbreak was contained using Merck's Ebola vaccine. It added that it was given to more than 1,600 of the patient's contacts and contacts of contacts. The cases were genetically linked to the 2018-20 Ebola epidemic that killed more than 2,000 people. The latest flare-up emerged in February in the city of Butembo. The Press Freedom Day is being observed across the world, including Pakistan, to advance transparency and empowerment. This report has more.
The theme of this year's World Press Freedom Day is information as a public good, which serves as a call to affirm the importance of cherishing information as a public entity. The day is being marked at a time the economic impact of the pandemic has hit many media outlets hard, threatening their survival. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres says free and independent journalism is our greatest ally in combating misinformation and disinformation.
As budget tightens, so too does access to reliable information. Rumors, falsehoods, and extreme or divisive opinions surge in to fill the gap. I urge all governments to do everything in their power to support a free, independent, and diverse media.
Since 1989, 19 journalists have been killed in the line of duty in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, while many others have been wounded and detained. Islamabad says it expresses solidarity with journalists in occupied Kashmir who continue to face systematic harassment and intimidation. The Foreign Ministry also reiterated Pakistan's commitment to press freedom, paying tribute to the journalist fraternity for their contributions during the pandemic. In the United States, Secretary of State Antony Blinken condemned government-imposed internet shutdowns which prevent freedom of expression. The Press Freedom Day has been celebrated since it was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in 1993.
A giant piece of artwork by Britain's David Hockney is lighting up several of the world's largest digital billboards. It is meant to inspire hope after a year of lockdowns. More in this report.
You might be sick of off-screens, but this is one virtual event you don't want to miss. Celebrated British artist David Hockney is bringing a new sun to 5 cities around the world. It will be shown once a day for the month of May in London, New York, Tokyo, Seoul, and Los Angeles. The organizers say the work called Remember You Cannot Look at the Sun or Death for Very Long is a symbol of hope and collaboration. As the world awakens from its lockdowns to protect populations from COVID-19, the artwork has already been emblazoned across the iconic billboard of London's Piccadilly Circus.
I don't really know if it inspired a lot, to be honest, but it's just a bit of light, really, and I think at the moment it's just that sunshine thing just feels good with lockdown hopefully easing up.
The global event coincides with the release of Hockney's new book Spring Cannot Be Cancelled and his Royal Academy exhibition, The Arrival of Spring, Normandy 2020, which will open in London on 23rd of May.
In Bangladesh's capital Dhaka, volunteers have been providing free Ramadan meals to the poor amid the financially burdening COVID-19 lockdown. Details in this report.
Dozens of people could be seen queuing by midday in Dhaka to pick up iftar, the meal that Muslims eat after sundown to break their fast during Ramadan. A charity in Bangladesh named Mehman Khana, or Food for Guests, is providing these free meals.
I'm fasting. I pull my rickshaw under the sun, but I make very little earnings, and I'm too poor to buy iftar. So I have come here for free food and park my rickshaw by the road.
The charity has been cooking up free meals since March last year, during the country's first coronavirus lockdown. According to the volunteers, they have managed to arrange food for around 1,000 people daily despite funding issues.
Last year, when there was a lockdown, due to the spread of the coronavirus, we started this program. We have our funding from our family, who pay a portion of their annual earnings to the poor and from their savings. We tried to run this program for the whole year, and for those who were doing daily labor, rickshaw drivers, and the poor living on the streets who have no earnings.
Bangladesh's current lockdown, which was triggered by rising cases, started on April 5th and was recently extended to May 5th.
It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In Spain, fans cheered as Matadors returned to the Madrid bull ring for the first time since the beginning of the pandemic. Details in this report.
Carrying red and yellow flowers to show bullfighting as a symbol of Spanish culture, the fans watched Matadors taking on 7 bulls at Madrid's Las Ventas bull ring. The charity contest was organized to raise money for jobless bullfighters and other workers in the sector. A maximum of 6,000 people were allowed at the event, equivalent to 40% capacity at the arena. Almost all of Spain's bull rings or plazas remained closed during the last year due to the lockdown restrictions, plunging the controversial spectacle and its matadors into a financial crisis. Spaniards are divided over the bloody sport, with some considering it an art form, while others viewing it as cruel. Bullfighting's popularity has declined in recent years. It has met opposition from an increasingly powerful animal rights movement and some left-wing councils that refuse to pay for bull festivals.
In other business updates, the Wall Street stocks have climbed on the first trading day of May as shares tied to the economic reopening continue to rise. The Dow Jones Industrial Average Index traded nearly 1% higher at the open, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite opened close to 0.5% higher. Similarly, the S&P 500 index also landed in the positive category and traded over 0.5% higher. Meanwhile, oil prices rose as concerns about demand in India offset optimism over a strong demand rebound. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.